This week's lecture is going to focus on research writing style. The point of this lecture is to give you kind of the basics of helping you write, in particular, writing a research paper. I'm sure most of you haven't written a research paper, but the process of writing one is tedious and at times it can be frustrating. So this is where research writing is a bit different compared to writing in other courses you've done in the past. In general, writing well is an important component to obtain, as we'll be working on this skill throughout the semester. Following this chapter, you'll be able to describe the characteristics of good research writing, be able to explain the importance of developing a content outline before writing, also be able to demonstrate different techniques for providing transitions between ideas, utilize parallelism in composing sentences, including lists, also be able to identify 3 common errors to avoid in research writing, and lastly, compare and contrast the elements involved in different editorial styles. This also ties in back to last lecture on referencing. Writing is a critical component of the research process. This is to provide an audience with the results of the research study that you just conducted. It's pointless or the results are of little value if they aren't published in a research journal where others can read about them. There are several hundreds of journals that you can submit your research paper to. However, journals are specialized in certain topics and will not accept any papers that are out of its area. So when submitting, you need to make sure you fit the criteria of the journal wherever that submission is. We've also discussed the misconceptions of researchers that they all wear white lab coats. A misconception or an impression you may be under is that research papers must be long, convoluted, and contain difficult language that only highly educated researchers know. That really isn't the case, but you will at times see very long research papers, and this may be due to how big the research study is or the topic of the study. Even though you need to actually design a study, collect and analyze the data, and interpret the results, it is important to practice writing early. Some reasons to start research writing early is that before beginning to conduct research, there's a step that you have to complete. This step involves writing a formal proposal that details the rationale, the specific aims, and the planned methodology for the study. Also, a proposed budget if you have funding, and ways that you're going to recruit participants. Overall, this proposal is for the IRB, which can accept or reject your research study that you want to perform. There are some cases where they ask to modify or clarify certain sections after you submit it to them, but generally speaking, as long as the writing is well written, the research study will be getting accepted unless it is unethical and dangerous. If you plan on going to graduate school, you'll be doing a lot of writing, especially for your thesis for your master's and your dissertation for your PhD. Basically, a thesis and dissertation is writing a research proposal that will bring new knowledge to a certain area. The research proposal must be approved by your mentor and committee members before actually collecting the data. In some other cases, during your senior year, you could be writing a research proposal for a certain project, such as for the research internship here. All researchers, even seasoned ones, must write a proposal to different organizations to receive funding. Developing mastery of research writing and writing in general takes a lot of time and practice. The more proposals or research reports or even papers that you write, the better you will become at that skill. So this course that you are taking, you will be getting in some practice at writing and research writing to improve that skill itself. Also, other courses in the program will help you with your writing skill. Some other ways to improve your writing skill is to have others, such as your friends or colleagues, read your work and provide you feedback, as well as your mentor providing you feedback. Whenever your mentor pretty much gives you feedback at first, it can be kind of a bit of a downer and at sometimes frustrating because it will seem like every sentence or pretty much every other sentence they're asking you to completely change it or modify it to sound a lot better. But all of your professors in exercise science has experienced this, and over time it will be beneficial for you and eventually make you a better writer. When writing a paper to submit to a journal, it will be kind of a team effort with all of the feedback from your mentor and your colleagues to successfully publish it. So when it comes to writing skills, write some and then you're going to write some more and then write even more on top of that. The field of science uses technical writing to clearly and concisely explain something to a particular audience. The writing process for this isn't supposed to be creative like fictional writing that you may be doing in an English course, but the writing will be more instructive, readily comprehensible, and to the point. When it comes to good research writing, it shares similar components to technical writing. So the characteristics of good research writing is that the writing is grammatically correct, such as standard rules of punctuation and spelling. It is clear and concise and avoids unnecessary jargon. It avoids long and complex sentences. It's also logically organized, pretty much meaning it flows very smoothly from one section to another, and even from one sentence to another using transitions. And probably most importantly, it is interesting to read. Not only that you have the good characteristics of research writing and that it's interesting, but it should also tell a story. Again, the story shouldn't be fictional, such as having characters exchange dialogue or anything like that. But a good research paper does tell a story by providing reasons on a certain topic and its importance, which usually starts in the introduction. Also, it tells a story in the discussion portion of a research paper by utilizing the results of the study and the importance it brings to the field, which may contradict our previous assumptions about a certain area. For example, it is once widely assumed that exercise during pregnancy was contraindicated or bad for all women, but recently research shows that moderate exercise most days of the week is safe for healthy pregnant women and is beneficial for them during the delivery process, and may also have benefits for the offspring. Additionally, good storytelling in research can be through pros and cons of a particular argument based on the literature. One example that is kind of a hot topic today is about muscle growth and its contributions to strength. As mentioned before, proper grammar and punctuation is also a necessary component in good storytelling. An important part of writing is organization. We'll go over 2 different paragraphs and then compare them to see which one is better at storytelling and contains good writing characteristics, as mentioned before. So for the first paragraph, patients with knee pain accompanied by lateral maltracking of the patella were the object of this study. We use electromyography to monitor activity in the vastus medialis oblique. There were 10 healthy subjects free from knee pain in this study, and these were not the aforementioned patients. The VMO is a key muscle in keeping the patella properly aligned. 8 exercises that strengthen the quadricep muscles were studied. We had the subjects do 3 repetitions of each exercise. The order of the exercises were random. The results showed that static quadriceps were the best at eliciting EMG in the VMO. The conclusion was that this exercise is best for these patients. In paragraph number 2, the purpose of the study was to determine which among 8 different quadricep exercises are most effective in strengthening the vastus medialis oblique muscle, a key player in preventing maltracking of the patella. 10 healthy subjects, free of knee pain, performed 3 repetitions each of these exercises, with the exercises ordered randomly while myoelectric activity in the VMO was monitored. The exercise eliciting the greatest amount of EMG in the VMO was the static quadricep, with no other significant differences present. We concluded that this exercise is the best choice for rehabilitating patients with chondromalacia secondary to lateral maltracking of the patella. Based on the 2 paragraphs, what are some of the differences between them and which one was better? When we first look at paragraph 1, it is difficult to follow and doesn't seem to make sense until you have finished reading it. Most likely, individuals will need to reread it at least another time to have a better understanding. When we look at paragraph number 2, this is much more readily understandable because it is organized in a logical fashion by stating the purpose of the study at the beginning and then following up with chronological events. In good research writing, logical organization of the points you wish to convey to the audience is essential to help ensure that the audience can readily and fully understand what you wish to communicate. The 2 reasons why this is important is that it will 1. Save time, and 2. The end product is much better. A tip to ensure that what you are writing is logically organized is to start with an outline that includes the main points that you wish to convey to the audience. It is always good practice to begin a writing assignment with a skeleton outline of what you want to say, and this writing assignment can be either short or very long. At times, if you are writing only one short paragraph, you may be able to compose the outline in your head. However, if you are writing more than one paragraph, it is important to have a clear written outline organizing your thoughts before you start writing. The outline doesn't need to be formal, it can just be bullet points in an order in which you want to present them to the audience. Another useful strategy when writing is to begin each paragraph with a topic sentence. A topic sentence states the main points of the paragraph, which is followed by additional sentences that provide the details. Some researchers expand their outline into a series of topic sentences, which provides an intermediate step between the outline and composition of the text. A different kind of strategy, which may come in handy once in a while, which I sometimes utilize, is to just start writing your ideas as it comes to you. After you have written them, you can then revise it and include the topic sentence and then logically organize it. Again, just make sure that the organization of each section of your paper is in logical form and isn't everywhere. We want the audience not to be confused. To make your research paper flow nicely from section to section and sentence to sentence is through transitions. Transitions are phrases or clauses that you use to help your reader follow the story you are trying to tell. These bridge the gap between different lines of thought. Using transitions makes your writing more readable but also more interesting. We'll go over some examples of different forms of transitions over the next couple slides. One form of transition is a sentence that briefly summarizes what you have said and indicates what will immediately follow. For example, as discussed previously, there are good reasons to abandon the prosthetics used in the last decade for shoulder replacements and to move forward with new technology. A second type of transition begins with a statement of a possible objection to what will follow and responds to it. For example, although stretching prior to athletic performance has long been advocated as prophylactic, the credible evidence in the research literature does not support that notion. Another transition technique involves a sentence that begins by summarizing a concept just presented and then posing a question about it. For example, as discussed, bone responds to added mechanical stress by hypertrophying. Does this suggest that in the absence of mechanical stress, bone will atrophy? Lastly, transitional words or clauses can be used at the beginning of a sentence to show either similarity or contrast to the preceding sentence or preceding paragraph. For example, you can say, in a similar study, Smith and Jones found that plyometrics added mechanical stress to the bone. You can see from these transition examples that it makes writing more readable and interesting, and also it flows very nicely as well. As you start reading the literature and writing, you will notice that there are associated technical terminology within each professional field and area of interest. For example, whether MPS or muscle protein synthesis is mediated by the convergence of AKT, mTOR, and MAPK signaling pathways on downstream targets such as 70K-DA S6 protein kinase and ribosomal protein S6 to achieve maximal stimulation of muscle protein synthesis still requires further examination. As you can see, this example and terminology might be over your head. However, after reading the literature thoroughly and through courses, you will start developing the technical terminology and have a better understanding of the area. Your thesis and dissertation will require a ton of reading, which will help with this terminology. Also, when writing your thesis or dissertation, it will be required that you use the appropriate terminology. A part of writing is how clear we are presenting our thoughts to the audience. It is important to consider the vocabulary you choose in writing. Although having a larger vocabulary can be advantageous by providing more options for communicating ideas in a certain fashion, that is not the goal for research writing. The goal of writing is to communicate clearly as possible by choosing words that are appropriate for your target audience. Communicating, whether it is written or oral, is a two-step process which requires the sender's expression, but also the receiver's comprehension, which again, the words you choose must be meaningful to your target audience in order for your message to be understood. The vocabulary you speak with other researchers should be different when speaking to your friends who aren't in the field to give them some lay terminology. A good way to express clarity is to eliminate unnecessary words and phrases. Often, we tend to write as many words to explain something in detail where it can start confusing the reader. So if you can express a thought in less words, it'll be better. An additional way to bring clarity is to omit unnecessary adverb and adjective modifiers. For example, these fascinating results strongly support our hypothesis contains unnecessary adverb and adjective modifiers. Instead, writing these results support our hypothesis is more preferable and also eliminates wordiness. Lastly, when writing, omitting words such as in fact, importantly, and hopefully, as they really don't bring anything, can help you bring more clarity to your writing. You can use these words in the conversation, but writing you kind of want to avoid, but in some cases they might be needed. When you write a sentence that includes a list of phrases or clauses, state all of them in the same way. This is referred to as parallelism, which improves the clarity of the whole sentence, making it easier to read and understand. When we look at the first sentence, for example, it says that study participants were asked to report to the lab, then to sign informed consent forms, and then receive directions from the research assistant does not all sound all the same. Instead, writing it as study participants were asked to report to the lab, sign informed consent forms, and follow directions from the research assistant sounds less choppy and a little bit more streamlined. This type of writing is related to the methodology section of a research paper. A part of avoiding wordiness that you may not consider is when you are citing the work of other researchers. When citing in text, you should refer to the researchers by their last name, for example, Maddox and Sunderland. You do not want to include their first names when citing. If you have 3 or more authors, this is where you will use the first author's last name, followed by et al. If you are referring to a specific study published by a researcher, it is preferred to include the year the study was published in. For example, Maddox and colleagues 2018. However, different journals have different editorial styles where if you cite the researcher's work, it might just be a number. If that is the case, the time you need to cite the author's last name and the year the study was published in is at the beginning of a sentence, or if you want it to be specific so the audience knows what study you are referring to. It can be a bit confusing on how to cite, but with writing practice and knowing which journal you are submitting to, it'll help. Keep in mind the characteristics of good research writing. However, it can be helpful to check your writing for some common errors. For example, studies have shown whatever the case may be, but not include a citation of the author's work either at the end of a sentence or within the text. Another common error is when writing is stating that the study found or the study concluded. Better wording is the researchers found, since they found or concluded something. When looking at the third example on the list of these results are significant because, the word significant should primarily be used when referring to statistical analysis. Another common writing error is stating that a study was similar to the one described above. You should always try and make each paragraph stand alone by incorporating the author's work, just so the reader doesn't have to look back to different parts of the text or even reread the paragraph to have an understanding. Continuing on common writing errors is writing the results showed that exercise A produced higher heart rates. It is important though to give a comparison for the audience in which you can say exercise A produced higher heart rates compared to exercise B. When using the word between, it should only be used for comparisons of 2 groups or conditions. If there are 3 or more groups being compared, the correct word to use is among. Also, when using the word data, data is plural, so you would want to say these data were collected under 3 conditions. Lastly, be careful about the word effect and effect. Both words can be correctly used as either a noun or a verb, but often though they get used incorrectly and interchangeably. Affect is meaning to influence, while effect is a change that occurs as a result of an action. Overall though, you should start becoming aware of these common writing errors. When writing, the use of active and passive voice can play a role. Passive voice is a sentence construction in which the subject is acted upon. For example, the use of the patellar tendon for the ACL graft was elected by the surgeon. When we look at active voice, this is a sentence construction in which the subject performs the action. For example, the surgeon elected to use the patellar tendon for the ACL graft. Out of the 2, active voice is preferred. The advantage of active voice and why it is preferred is that it is more direct, clear, and less wordy compared to passive voice. It is also the more preferred way in research writing because it gives a more powerful form of expression. Hopefully by now you know to avoid plagiarism or passing off someone else's ideas or words as your own. If you plan on using a direct quote from a published source in your own writing, you should use quotation marks and then cite the source. Failure to do so is unethical, illegal when the material is copyrighted, and sloppiness or being just lazy is not a legitimate excuse. Even plagiarizing from non-copyrighted documents that are posted on the internet may be equally dishonest because you are still attempting to pass off the ideas and words of someone else as your own. Generally speaking, it is best to not directly quote from another source. Rather, paraphrasing the quote can be less wordy, and using it in writing can break up the flow and be distracting when using a direct quote. The rule for citations is that thoughts generally regarded as common knowledge do not require citations. But if you are unsure, it is always best to cite the work. Plagiarizing can range in different penalties. This is part of your academic dishonesty section that you will usually see in the syllabus at any university. The penalty can range from a grade reduction for the course, a 0 for the assignment, and lastly, expelled from the university. So it is best of interest for you to not copy any work from your classmates when submitting any written assignment, whether that be for this course, any of your labs that you're currently in, or any other courses you are taking. After you have finished writing, whether it is an assignment for a course, a research proposal, or submitting a paper to a journal, it is important to carefully proofread to correct any errors that you may have missed. Not proofreading is irresponsible and can make you and your team look sloppy, careless, and unprofessional. It doesn't take that much time to proofread and correct any errors compared to the amount of time it took you to write. Nowadays, most word processing software highlights misspelled words and ungrammatical construction. But you should not always rely on the software, as it may try to autocorrect to a different word and also try to correct the spelling of the researcher's last name correctly. If the audience reads the paper without you proofreading it, it may also annoy them. This is where obtaining feedback from colleagues and your mentor is important. Additionally, multiple drafts will help cut down these mistakes before the final draft is submitted to the journal. Again, writing is a skill that will improve over time and needs practice. It can be difficult and frustrating, especially at the beginning, but it is an important skill to have. In the last lecture, we touched on referencing and the different styles different journals require. The reasons that journals have specific editorial style is to establish a consistent format in their papers. Some formatting that will differ from journal to journal is the components required for the paper and the headings of each section. Also, the ordering and format of the reference list. Is the reference displayed alphabetically or in order within the text? Also, how many figures and tables are allowed, and which symbols can be utilized to display differences between groups and significance. To make the referencing process a bit easier and not having to go to the journal's website, referencing software programs are available, such as Zotero and EndNote. When you are looking for any reference, it will be listed at the back of the research paper or textbook chapter. There is no set number of references or citations you need to have in journals when submitting your research paper. The number of references will be based on the study and the past literature. Also, there is no single best or most commonly used editorial style, since it is all journal-based. But you can utilize a style that you like, and when you submit or resubmit to a different journal, you can switch styles using Zotero and EndNote, which will make it a breeze. Some things that need to be completed for next week is quiz number 2, which is due by Monday, September 14th by 11:59 p.m. Also, please complete and submit the Introduction and Methodology Practice Assignment, which is also due on Monday, September 14th by 11:59 p.m. Also, still think of a topic for you to write for your literature review and for you to present at the end of the semester. Please email me your topic for approval. In the subject line, please have it say EXS 275 topic. Also, please read the journal article by Lowry and colleagues. We'll be discussing this on actually how to read a research article, and then this is going to help you for one of your article assignments that you'll be submitting later.